Leave me alone. What have I done to you? Please. I promise. No, please. Out of the house!
Great benefits of video games as a whole is they're still reasonably young in the great field of medium entertainment. Not so with horror, which is as pretty much long-standing as anyone can recall throughout history. From books, films, theatre and games, horror is a big genre, but they tend to cover quite a wide aspect. You get some of the action-orientated titles, such as the recent released Evil Within 2, which wears its heart and gore on its sleeve, and combat is front and centre in that title, although jump scares do pop in from time to time. But other titles, such as the simply incredible Resident Evil 7 from last year, really pushed the medium on, and certainly in the VR space. This is a title that if you like horror games, you absolutely have to play, and in VR, it's just on a complete another level. But here we're seeing something that blends between the two, and one of those titles from Hideo Kojima. PT was a game that influenced a great many, and that certainly can be seen here with The Beast Inside. A psychological thinking man's horror game that really has the jump scares down pat and creates the atmosphere that will have you nervous and twitchy. This is a brand new title from Illusion Ray and is being funded currently by KickStarter. But the game itself is more of an action, slow-paced horror title that has you thinking with puzzles, atmosphere and a strange mixture of two time zones that you merge between the 1970s and the 1880s. This creates a good sense of foreboding fear and a long history with which the game can play on. It's not due for release until sometime in 2019, but thanks to the early prototype the team have made available to Kickstarter backers, you can enjoy the title now, and that's exactly what I'm looking at. It is already an impressive looking title and really sets the benchmark for what we can expect next year when the game fully releases. Visually, the title is very impressive indeed, using Unreal Engine 4 and photogrammetry techniques, the same techniques we saw in games such as PT and Resident Evil 7, amongst others like Battlefront. This aids artists and modelers by allowing them to take photographs of objects and materials to actually create the textures in the game rather than modelling within a software modeler or the game engine itself. This creates an excellent base to build your PBR material shader system in the title. Having the base diffuse properties of the objects in question, you can then build on this with your shader system by the relevant specular or Fresnel calculations on the surface materials and the lighting properties. PT has also had an influence on the actual style of the game over and above the aesthetic. Now the tale is very slow paced and it does rely heavily on jump scares, but they do a very good job of that. It flows very similar to most horror titles that you have seen, but visually it is a cut above pretty much everything you've seen thus far. This is certainly looking at this early stage as good as Resident Evil 7. Now the Kickstarter is already funded, but you can jump in and grab yourself a copy already before it ends at the end of this month, and there are a few goals, which includes releasing on Xbox One and PS4 at later date, and a VR option which this game will certainly benefit from. As such, I'm not going to be overly critical with the title. Artistically, there are a few areas where certainly an improvement or tweak would be beneficial. The light mask GI bounce solution that they're using with post-process volumes can be a little bit oversaturated and heavy on bloom. The screen space reflection technique they use for GI bouncing is a little better, but you can see it fading in and out within the frustum view, which is a shame. But if you knock this down on the lower settings, then you lose the screen space effect and have an amplified bloom look, which overall though, the visual quality and the balancing of the tone, the light maps and the overall saturation levels is very good, as is the material qualities themselves. Now you walk outside and you see that beautiful foliage system in effect. It's got a long draw distance and is very dense indeed. This is clearly an Unreal Engine 4 title, and that includes the post-processing suite on the anti-aliasing. It uses a temporal anti-aliasing and a reconstruction method, I'm sure, certainly using that on the shadow areas, improving the visual quality in addition to smoothing out those edges and shimmer at the cost of some of the sharpness. But again, the options are there. You can turn all this off as you so wish. You can also scale the resolution down below a native 1080 and above to 125% to help out those lower quality quality machines, or just push some of the visual qualities up and lower the resolution to compensate. Using all of the options in the menu screen, you can get a decent level of performance across the hardware that I'm testing here. It's currently only available on PC. So here we're seeing it on a GTX 750 Ti, very much low end, but it gives a very decent quality performance up to the much more powerful GTX 970, far from top end, but it shows that even at this level with the ultra settings you can get a near 60 FPS at certain points. It does dip at certain areas, but if you're willing to take some tearing, then you can get more towards that 60 FPS line more often if you want to push the visual quality out. And it uses it extensively. Rather than pushing every effect up to maximum though, it does balance that out, such as light shafts used here, which are crepuscular rays, giving that volumetric look to objects as the moonlight casts through the trees, giving that long silhouetted shadow through it. These aren't volumetric lights, these are a screen space effect, which are a little cheaper, but they certainly look as good, giving that wipe from the frustum as you move your camera around. Subsurface scattering is used intensively across other objects such as skin, and as the light bounces around, per object motion blur and velocity based camera blur helps to smooth out the movement as you walk through this world and turn your head. It can be slightly intense at certain points, and maybe an option in there just to tone down the motion blur itself may be a welcome addition, but I'm still a big fan. It also has some really nice touches such as refraction on glass and translucency. This is all down to the pre-pass work on the actual shading system itself. It's not a flat deferred engine, so it gives the team a few options to work with translucency and transparency. This refraction technique looks excellent. As you can see, the objects behind the door actually twist and merge as the light and the door moves around. Obviously lowering the post-processor effects does remove this effect, but it's a very nice one indeed. But all these beautiful objects and material system would be pointless without lighting, or the lack of it in those darker, gloomier sections. Giving you a dynamic and movable light source means that they can cast shadows everywhere in the game and mix those dynamic shadow casting lights with the static shadow maps, which works exceptionally well. Clearly, with all the static objects in the title, they are using the cache map here to keep performance as high as possible, but it still gives you an impact here on the GTX 970, and even more so on the 750 Ti, but one you should add in the menu at the sacrifice of others. But it's a welcome boost to the title and adds a great deal to the atmosphere, as you can see the shadow casting from your lamp itself and all the objects in the scene. The game's impact and atmosphere would be greatly affected without this effect in play, so they've balanced it and used it exceptionally well here. Now on top of this, they've also integrated a very strong and believable physics system in the game. Objects fall, move, push, pull, and that's actually a core aspect of the title itself. You pull doors open, you push objects out of the way, and sometimes it can be a little fiddly and certainly needs areas for improvement, but I do like the touch in the title, and I'm sure they'll use this during the puzzles, as that physical balance of object material weight and shifting will allow you to solve puzzles in a more natural and organic manner. And that is one of the other standout features of the title already for me. Now on top of all these visual features, physics-based action and lighting that is really exceptional, it still performs very well indeed, putting in a very commendable 60 FPS performance in the lighter, brighter moments on this GTX 970 and i5 4690. It certainly isn't stressing out the top-end machines, so I would suggest you can get more towards the 1440 or 4K if you have a much more powerful GPU at your disposal. Running down to the lower 750 Ti shows that the game scales exceptionally well. Paired with an old octa-core FX 8350, it still performs very well indeed. Of course, true 60 FPS is off the cards, as is a true native 1080p, running at 75% resolution scaling here, mostly around the medium settings. We get somewhere at a locked 30 most of the time. You can sacrifice image stability with some tearing in the title to improve that performance slightly, pushing it more towards the 40s at these lower settings, and that helps a little bit with the response on the mouse control, which is supported as standard here. It will support controllers at a later date when it's fully released. Right now only supports mouse, but I don't find that a problem at all anyway, and I'm sure many of you watching this video won't either. As a sampler of what the team can put together, it's already proven itself with it securing its base level of Kickstarter backing, but it does have some stretch goals with console's additional content and that VR option, which I hope it really achieves, and I've already put my money forward to make sure that it does. I would have liked them to have added some of the action and shooting sections we saw in their full trailer, but that doesn't take anything away from a title that certainly has me intrigued enough to see just what this team can deliver with Unreal Engine 4. And with that, I fade out into the night, but you can watch more content on my channel, like, subscribe and follow me on Twitter. And if you want to buy me a drink for the work that I put together, then also follow the Patreon link below. Oh yeah, and one other tip, if you hear some strange noises and howling from the basement, maybe taking a sneaky peek with your lamp and no weapon at all isn't the best option. I'll catch you on the next one.